My name is Amanda Triplett, and I am a 2024-2025 Pando Artist in Residence. So I work mostly with recycled textiles, and I use them sculpturally. So I do a lot of bending and folding and manipulating the fabric, and then I stitch them into place with needle and thread. I went to visit Pando in August of 2024, flying into the Las Vegas airport and driving up around 4 hours from there. And it was my first time experiencing the canyons and desert of Southwest Utah. And I was really struck by how stark and beautiful in this whole other way. So when I started climbing about 9,000 feet and came upon Pando, it was really a stunning contrast to the Southwest landscape. So there were a number of small practices that I did at Pando. One of them was just documenting the wildflowers and different plant species that I found. And I did that through a sketchbook, drawings and sketchbook. And then I would do these kind of more abstract paintings where I was playing with the kinds of colors that I was seeing there. Another thing, little sample of something I did like a small impression of a leaf, just trying to understand like the pigments and the color. And I wasn't sure how that would hold to the fabric, but it did end up holding, and I had a small leaf impression. And I was really obsessed with like the kind of community of like what the composition of Pando. So documenting the different wildflowers and lichens and mosses really gave me an idea of like what else is there, what is Pando's kind of community, what other creatures or plant life is hanging out there. And so I spent a lot of time just trying to understand that. And I really thought that my project would go in the direction of these different wildflowers, but I was surprised when I got home. I really started to think about just Pando itself and thinking about multiplicity. This piece is called Overstory, Understory, and really it came from this idea of trying to understand the way that Pando is a container, and a container for other life, and also a container of all of these multitudes of things and different kinds of aspects. So I was thinking about a basket and like the way that, or like things that hold other things. And so you can see there's like kind of a curvaceous shape to it. And I was building it. I first started with these smaller elements because I was also thinking about the layers of Pando. So you've got the rocks and the microbiota and like all of the things making up the dirt, and then all of the the wildflowers, and then the layers like the bushes and the big sagebrush and all of the other things, the understory that comes after that. And so this piece was really honing in on that idea. And I started with making the smaller pieces, and then I found this wonderful curtain that was transparent. And I was thinking about it really matched the color of the trunks. And then I started layering it with different laces and things to get this, kind of thickness and to bring more life to it. And I kept noticing how wonderful it was up against the light to be able to see through it. And there was a point where I just knew it had to be a lighted piece, and I kind of started thinking about it with that in mind. And then I constructed the canopy from small bits of green with little bits of blue peeking through of different recycled fabrics. And then I was layering in beads so that you could get that idea of the way that the leaves quake and tremble. And so it just ended up being a very labor-intensive piece because I was individually stitching beads in, and there's a lot of stitches in this piece, a lot of hand stitching. But there was something that made it was a very strong drive to make it this lit piece to capture kind of the glow of Pando. When I first got home, I started to think about the leaves of the aspen. I think that was the thing that had me visually in terms of memory. And so I have an aspen tree in my front yard, so I started collecting leaves. And when collecting the leaves, I noticed how unique and different they were. And each one was so this range of colors, from like yellow and oranges to vibrant greens to reds. And I started to document them, photo document them, and then I would scan them and then print them on fabric just using an inkjet printer. And then I started to embroider them and to kind of stitch them together into a shape, because I thought that it was really a good example of kind of the multiplicity of Pando, with this, like, you know, all of these different leaves creating a canopy. And then I started to actually embroider my own leaves just based on the ones that I had collected. And it was like snowflakes. There were no two that were even remotely alike. And I started to recognize the patterns in the leaves and all the different kinds and colors. And it was just a tremendous fascination with the patterns that I could find. And then I stitched them together in this piece and started to create a canopy, a small canopy. So the shape of Pando really came from this idea, again, around portraiture and how to understand what the shape of Pando was, and so, or what a picture of Pando would look like. And so I started looking at aerial photography of Pando. And what's interesting is you notice that Pando will subtly change over the years, and the different maps show different forms. So this piece really came from a bunch of different maps and just kind of building each individual piece and then aggregating them into this larger piece. So thinking about the different curves and forms that you find within Pando. And it was really interesting to make and this piece is actually quite small, but to think about Pando being this huge forest, and that actually the piece is quite small because you're thinking about it from like an aerial perspective.
My residence with Friends of Pando has really deepened my understanding of nature as a network, a connected entity that holds, nurtures, and cultivates itself and the species under its canopy. I feel like there's a kind of model for cooperation and creativity that Pando itself embodies, which is a huge part of why this artist in residence is so important and essential right now.